Angela, would you mind real quick for me? Can you unmute everybody in here before we get rolling? Sorry, Jay. Jay, can you?
Yeah, sure.
Let's see. All right. So all of you should be good and going here. Before I move on, let's test some things to make sure everything's working okay. If you want, please drop something in the webinar or chat in the QA, just to make sure that you're out here. You can see, you can hear me, and the screen looks okay. Just lets me know that you're here and we're ready to rock and roll, kind of. Yeah, absolutely. We can get a copy of this recording. Yep. Yep. Perfect. Perfect. So imagine we'll probably have some late individuals. Normally that's completely fine. So without further ado, I'll say let's get rolling unless you have anything that I need to wait for here, Jay. Angela's joining now. Okay, perfect. Then I will actually let Angela present this portion. So that means you get a little bit of a breather, or you get a few moments before we get going.
Good afternoon. This is Angela Gibson with Abraham's Consulting. Welcome, Harold and Ruben and Ryan. Thank you for joining us. We have on the line already Christopher Reed with Redhat. Christopher, are we waiting for someone else on your side?
Nope, I'm it.
You're the man. Okay, well, that's awesome. Do you want to let's give it another 2 or 3 minutes to see?
Sure.
Who else will join?
Sure. Sorry, everybody. You got about another few minutes. So if you need to get up, stretch your legs, get a cup of coffee, have a breather, now would be the time, right? I know we go from meeting to meeting, so feel free, absolutely, to stretch your legs a little bit.
Well, it's 1:05. Let us begin. Thank you so much again for joining. As you know, I'm with Abraham's Consulting, and we provide niche solutions in the area of storage, security, and networking. Redhat is one of our partners, and I hope you'll find great value in this presentation. So go ahead, Christopher. Start the car.
Yep, absolutely. Did you want to touch this slide, or I apologize?
Yeah, well, I'll just talk about it a little bit for the people who don't know. But for the most part, I think the people on here knows that we, like I said, we focus on niche solutions around security, networking, and storage, and consulting services. We've had a lot of consultants on site for OTI. We are a prime for IBM with the city, and we also provide consultants at the Port Authority as well. We've been in business for about 18 years, and the cloud and managed services is also part of our portfolio. And so we certainly don't want to just limit this conversation to just this Redhat event, but this is just an opportunity for us to continue to bring value. So yes, please go ahead and proceed, Christopher.
Perfect. Thank you, Angela.
Mhm.
So real quick, I think everybody said they could use chat. What we want to make sure real quick is that everybody's comfortable with the platform that we're on today. Everybody can talk, communicate. Really, we want this to be kind of an open platform. As you probably know, the Red Hat products are built on what we call an open source and a community. And that's really what we try to strive and continue to provide value through. So absolutely, anytime throughout this call, you're allowed to interrupt me and ask questions. Your questions to me are more priority based than this slide deck. And as such, we may skip over a few of these slides as we're going over them. So don't feel like you can't ask questions about a slide, just some I don't find as valuable or don't hit as far home. So I may skip over some slides. And talking about that, what are we going over today? We're going over the Red Hat Ansible automation platform. So what is this? It's an automation suite, really focused on providing automation in the IT infrastructure. So what this isn't is it's not a robotic process automation or it's not a business process automation tool. And how the format of today looks is we have roughly 4 hours. If we can get through it quicker, great. If not, that's fine too, right? I'll try and be as effective as possible, but if we need to slow down to focus and work through some of the hands-on exercises, absolutely, let's take the time to do that. Also in discussing, today is going to be broken apart into slide deck, hands-on, slide deck, hands-on, so on and so forth. As we continue throughout the day, it'll be less of me talking and more of you working. If you don't want to do the hands-on portion, not a problem. If you are here for just the sales portion, that's completely fine as well. You just simply need to make it through the first portion until you see something that says section 1 or exercises 1. All right. So before I get rolling today, because I have a lot of talking in store, does anybody have any questions or any concerns at all before I get moving? Can you see my screen? Can you hear my voice? I'm gonna hold there for a few seconds. Don't see any questions. All right, thank you. All good for everybody. Fantastic. So real quick, what we're gonna go through is Windows automation. Just as you all are aware, we have many different Ansible workshops. This one focuses predominantly on Windows. So if you do have questions, I would definitely tell you now, say, hey, can you provide any tidbits about Linux? Can you provide any tidbits about security? Can you provide any tidbits about automation through? And as we work through these slide decks, it'll give me a platform to provide examples. As you can guess, automation is a big, large, wide world, and we have many things that we're trying to automate, especially when we start talking about this world of robotics and AI and you know, trying to replace more workloads, right? So absolutely feel free to chime in. Understanding Ansible modules, we're going to talk about what an Ansible playbook is, how to utilize it, how to write one, how to work with an Ansible playbook or a YAML file, the Ansible controller, or also called the Ansible control plane, and then how to reuse, and more appropriately, how to position Ansible with roles. All right, without further ado, let's get moving. Anyone can automate, but an enterprise needs to coordinate and scale, right? So we can start with a small shell script, but really that scalability needs to hit home. We need to be able to track, we need to be able to delegate, and we need to be able to share. And that's really where Ansible is about, right? Collaboration, orchestration across teams. So we all have many tools that are already accomplishing that automation goal today, right? Security has some, development has some, IT operations. I even like to say human resources probably has some. But how can we break those silos, right? How can we break those gaps? How can we utilize or orchestrate all those tools together, right? So for example, IT operations may be managing a ticket system, security operations may be managing another ticket system. How do I get them to talk so that I'm not doing double the work, that I'm getting from where I need to be in the work I need to do from A to Z? And that's really where Ansible bridges those gaps. It's not here to replace the tools you have, it's here to utilize. So what we say, this world is better together, or for example, being able to talk from one endpoint to the other. So you probably already know this, but Ansible is one of the largest automation platforms. And as such, a lot of vendors want to work with the Ansible platform. And most of them have an API or some SSH or some Python utility that actually works or communicates directly with Ansible to help us starting that orchestration, right? To be able to work through our lines of business together, whether that be Cisco, whether that be Windows, whether that be Linux, right? Whether that be Aruba, F5, right? If we want to accomplish a task from A to Z, for example, opening a ticket, making changes on a firewall, recreating a server, closing the ticket out, creating new users, all of that should be a single journey, right? Or we should be able to automate all of that from A to Z, utilizing whatever tools you are already utilizing today. So can Ansible replace it? Yeah, probably could. But more so, you can utilize the tools you have, or right, the toolbox you have, and better utilize those tools together to create an orchestration platform. My favorite infomercial as a kid was always that set it and forget it. And I want to say that Ansible is that tool, but there is, as technology progresses, you create playbooks that can, of course, you create once, you set it and forget it. But you will have to tune and retool along the line. And as they mature, they will tend to grow anyways. So why the Red Hat Ansible automation platform, right? What's the real value here? And I always start from the agentless one. There's no agent to install with Ansible whatsoever. We utilize platforms that are already available today, or I should say connection methods that are already available today. So for example, what does that look like? If you're on Linux, that could be SSH. If you're on Windows, it could be WinRM or SSH, right? If you're using a Cisco switch or firewall, that could be an API, or it could be XML over netconf, right? A very complex situation. But Ansible has created the toolkit to ensure that we're utilizing communication methods that are already tried and true, and not trying to create some new client and connection path, right? So that's one thing that's great, right? We know that RSA keys or AES keys are pretty good. But when we start creating that agent to server to client connection, you never know what you're going to get. Ansible is very simple, right? And as saying that we utilize a language called YAML, which can be read and written from the naked eye. So predominantly, if you're good at taking notes, or whoever wrote it is good at taking notes, you can just about tell what's going on. Things can be changed very easily. There's not a whole lot of extra syntax when you see and work with the Ansible playbook. And in fact, some vendors even provide what we call jumpstart playbooks. So for example, there's a company called Cohesity, and their playbooks actually deploy the Cohesity agent for you. So if you can already Ansible into the server, you can now deploy a Cohesity agent into the server as well. But as well, that YAML toolkit is being used in a plethora of areas. For example, if you're using Kubernetes, if you're using Stix or Sigma in security, if you're using NetPlan in Linux, if you're using Docker or containers at all, it includes Kubernetes, that YAML language is already utilized there. And essentially what you're doing is just broadening your toolkit, right? You're bringing that language that you already know, or that you're going to have to know in the future, and you're writing it with Ansible or YAML playbooks. Now, I definitely understand that there are some lines of business that will probably never touch a YAML file in their life. That's completely fine. With Ansible, you absolutely will. And then orchestrating at scale, being able to work through and deliver from single lines of business to multiple lines of business, right? We say the big benefit is orchestration through Ansible, but being able to automate and orchestrate whatever your needs are, whatever you can think of, is just as good. One thing that's I've always enjoyed about the Ansible tool is that understanding that a lot of our vendors started as customers. So for example, NetApp, they had some hurdles with deploying and configuring some devices quickly and rapidly for their clients, right? They wanted to be able to do it in minutes versus the hours it was taking. So they created an Ansible module to be able to do that instantly or within their expected time frame. How about that? Instant's a rare feat. I can't even cook popcorn instantly. So what exactly can I fit into the Ansible automation platform? For example, what does it actually do for me, right? So I like to pause on this slide. And really the fun thing here is you get to do this on all of these. So if you're orchestrating firewalls, deploying applications in the cloud and containers, if you're doing CI/CD through network applications and storage, if you're securing and complying servers, clouds, and load balancers. So I'll pause here, let your imagination fly. Ansible's pretty good from the IT infrastructure on being able to work through, coordinate, and work through workflows. All right, moving on. As well, I said, if you ever have any questions, feel free to throw them in the webinar chat or QA, or I think you have the ability to come off mute, maybe not there. So if not, that's fine. But absolutely feel free to ask a question at any time. I always like to make that important because I might be able to get you to sleep in 3 hours. So feel free to interact. We have over 100 certified platforms. What a certified platform is their content has been verified by both the vendor and the Red Hat Ansible team to ensure that they work. So if you actually work with one of the certified platforms, which are included in the Ansible automation purchase, you can use them as much as you would like once you've purchased Ansible. And essentially you can get support from either vendor if needed. You also get access to collections that you can manipulate, change, move, add, whatever you'd like. Absolutely. So what makes the platform, right? It includes the Ansible automation platform, which is the control plane, a lot of the cloud services, so telemetry, being able to go essentially phone home to the Red Hat cloud services to get a better further understanding of value. So we can actually do a calculation of playbooks that are running to show you the value that you're saving. And even planning, we can help you plan with automation, right? Because we know that you have to invest time. So what does that time investment look like? And I'll show you a little bit later on. We can do a live demo of some of the examples inside of the cloud. And then certified content, as we talked about just the slide ago, it's essentially certified content from the vendor. And if you ever want to see any of those, you can absolutely request a trial and we can get you locked and loaded on the Ansible automation platform. We can even provide one to you if you'd like to go ahead and get started and try and start working through it. Absolutely can. I should mention that some of these slides, I'm definitely going to be reiterating content. You're going to see probably a few slides on certified content. You're going to see a few slides on probably some of the playbooks. So if you don't hear it thrice, I didn't say it enough. The Ansible platform is create, operate, and consume. That's kind of the life cycle we want you to take. We want you to create those playbooks, ensure that they operate in your environment, and then consume them. Right? But being able to create them for you is where some of that certified content can be. For example, we include some Jumpstart playbooks in those certified content. Not all of them. So for example, some things are definitely going to be overly complex for us to create for you. So that would be, for example, Cisco ACLs. If we're trying to make some firewall changes, we prefer not to make assumptions on environments, right? This is about being able to have the flexibility that Red Hat provides to make the changes you need. Yeah, and I'll kind of skip through this as we just kind of talked about it. When you're creating the Ansible automation platform, predominantly you will work in something like Visual Studio Code. But how this looks for us is we actually build content, right? That would be like a simple playbook. And then you are able to deliver that content to what we call a trust. So when you start seeing these are kind of what I like to call the Red Hat way. But essentially you build a playbook that gets utilized in the Ansible automation platform that then gets delivered to your endpoint. In a lot of documentation through Red Hat, when you see trust, we actually think endpoint, or what we call as node count. So this is your first look at an Ansible playbook. It looks like a little bit of the formatting got hurt, but it shouldn't create too much of a problem here. But do be aware, as you're working through Ansible playbooks, formatting is important. And the reason why formatting is important is because, as you can tell here, there's no additional really extra characters or variables, right? There's not a whole lot here to make it unusable. A lot of it here is seen to be understood, right? Like you can tell, all right, we're going to start and stop on the IAS firewall. Cool. It's on a host of Windows Web. Awesome. That's exactly what I need. Become, I could probably guess that's the administrator, right? Because that's exactly what it is. And then below that is the tasks. And each of these is the function of a task, right? So I think this actually runs through it. Nope, it doesn't. Apologize. Oh, I lost myself there. Apologize on that. Okay, I thought I was going to break it down a little bit more. It might later in the later slides. But on this task portion, if you see these items here that say win_service, these are actually the do function. They are actually what is actually running for the playbook. This name, host, and become at the very top here. Let's see if I can annotate this. This section right here is what we call the play. So this is actually setting up the Ansible playbook. All right. This top section here, name, has no real value. The only value this provides is that it simply is the start of a play. So when this runs, it'll say play, have that to a semicolon, and say start IIS stop firewall. Right? So then we actually have our two options below, which are host, which is Windows Web. In this playbook, that would mean it would need to be DNS resolvable. The become would essentially say, I need to become the administrator for Windows. And then you would have the task. So anything below this task would normally be left aligned. That might have got chopped up in the slides, so I do forgive me there. But you can see there's a name of IIS running. Once again, this guy provides no value apart from he just is displayed when it's running. So now you would have win service, which is a module, right? And then it would have the name of the service and the state of running. So now I get to tell you about the secret sauce with Ansible. What is so great about Ansible for these portions is we are something, and the word of the day is idempotent. And essentially what that means is if this service is already running, it will do nothing. If the service is in some other state other than running, it will convert it to running. So if the state is in stopped or manual, it'll then convert it to running to ensure that this W3 service is running. Most of the Ansible modules have some form of idempotency, so that when you're writing a playbook, you can write it for desired result and not for an outlier. Right? I remember I used to write shell scripts I always have like one server that would have a problem that I'd have to work with on either a firewall or something. So I'd have to make it do an if check to then go, if this firewall is off, let's turn it on. If not, keep going. No additional if statements, nothing at all. You can make the assumption that we're going to make this service run. All right. So apart from that, I'll keep going. We're definitely going to talk about an Ansible playbook later down the road. So if I was confusing at all, don't worry. We'll have more opportunity to disassemble that confusion. Oh, other than my annotations got to get removed. Clear. Wasn't quite prepared for that one. Apologize. So inside an Ansible playbook, right, we said at the top there was plays, right, and that's kind of the setting up of an Ansible playbook. You then have the modules. As you can tell in here, we call them the gears or the gears in the engine. And then you have the plugins. And plugins really are further extensibility into an Ansible playbook. Really, we call them, if Ansible doesn't have something that you're trying to accomplish, that's what a plugin's for. So they're not utilized in all playbooks, but they are utilized in some. All right, so here's the start of a play. As you can see on the right there, name, host, become is the actual play here. We're trying to understand and set some groundwork for what's about to happen. So these are what we call the building blocks for an Ansible playbook. Moving on to the module. As you can see here, the name is IIS is running. Right? The name is W3 service and the state is running. All of that is a single task. Right? And these are kind of the do operation. If you're working with Windows, this is going to essentially run a PowerShell operation at the endpoint. If you're in Linux, it's going to be Python. They can essentially be written in Go, Golang, C++, C, C#. They can be written in whatever language you would like, but predominantly we see them in PowerShell and Python. And then plugins, right, we say are extensibility. Really, if Ansible's core functionality cannot meet what you're trying to do, a plugin can normally provide further output. So for example, some of the data that we get back is normally in JSON format, or we'll convert it to a YAML format. What you can actually do is filter out the data that we get back to a cleaner YAML format and a cleaner JSON format. And you can see on the bottom, they were using the filter, right, to nice JSON. And if you're familiar with filters at all, you can even set native filters in here so that all the data comes back in a way that you're used to querying or filtering, because you can actually run what we call a JMIS path or JQ, like JSON queries inside the Ansible playbook to get data back if you're working directly with an API. Before I move on there, does anybody have any questions on the Ansible playbook, how it works, how it functions? Feel free. You can ask any question you'd like. Doesn't even have to be about Ansible playbooks. You can ask anything at all. I'm looking more so at the webinar chat. So if you do ask an open Q&A, I'm doing a bad job. Apologize. Any questions so far? Yep. What you got, Harold? Jay, can we unmute the panelists or the attendees? At least Harold. if possible.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I don't want to go off too much on a tangent, and this seems kind of obvious, but a prerequisite for automation, you should have your workflows, processes, and procedures already defined. Is that correct?
Great question. So you're asking about the automation journey. And predominantly, yes, you would want that. The more you can have organized, the more you can have planned, the more you understand, the easier it is to implement. However, I will say that is not the state of most businesses, organizations, and enterprises today. What oftentimes we see is that when someone's trying to automate, it's because they ran into a task they got tired of doing, or they no longer want to do anymore. And predominantly that's done from an engineer level, not done from a VP or managerial level of any type. So normally the beginning approach we call opportunistic. And what we're really trying to say there is what are some areas in your company that automation could quickly make small changes that would provide a lot of value.
Thank you for that. I have a loud keyboard. Just mute me again because I don't want to interrupt you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And feel free to you can question me and challenge me. Absolutely. But I understand that each business and each role, that's kind of the Red Hat stance, is being able to take that opportunistic journey. Each company, each business has their hurdles, has their challenges. And I oftentimes find the best way to get your biggest bang for your buck, if your business is already buying into automation, is not really squaring away your processes and procedures, because that's going to take months, years. Who knows, right? Some companies may never accomplish that. But if you can take what you have to do a lot or very frequently, if you can just automate some of that, it may be the most opportunistic approach for your company. Right. We have a area that we kind of say that start small and things will grow. And I like that approach. I tend to see that work best in most organizations that adopt is if you buy a big package and just try and implement it, oftentimes you're going to get a lot of kickback. But if you can have the engineers do the buy-in, you tend to get a lot of wins.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. That's a great question. Very good. Perfect. I'm going to ask you to mute him if that's okay, Jay. You're going to be doing a lot of work today. But absolutely, we want you asking questions. I do. I may not have the best answers, so if you need to throw that one into the trash can for a later time, feel free. Let's talk about Ansible roles. So back on track to the actual slide deck that I have here. Roles are a way of essentially reusing Ansible playbooks that we've created before. So when you're, for example, installing IIS or making firewall changes on a server, it may be pretty consistent, right? Like, I need to enable the firewall, install Windows security or whatever platform you're installing. But I may need to make a few little changes, right? Like I may need to open port 80 and 8080 for the SQL servers and port 443 for the web servers, right? So how would you make that work in a playbook that I've already created? Well, you can do it with something called roles, which is our way of essentially stripping out a playbook to make it easy to understand, easy to change, and easy to use. Does it replace the playbook? No. More so, it's built for additional options. And anytime you grab something off essentially the internet, what we call Ansible Galaxy or Ansible certified content, it'll come in a role format or a collection format. And then we move on to collections. So what's a collection? A collection is a bundle that includes a role, but may even include modules, playbooks, plugins, docs, tests. And you're going to come back to me and say, why do we need all that? Why can't we just have a role? That's a really good question. So let me take you back to Ansible's earlier days when we had just roles, but we worked with AWS. As you can probably guess, with AWS, you have many functions, features to work with. So they would have to grab a role for working with containers. They'd have to grab a role to make DNS changes. They'd have to grab a role. So you can see how this would quickly grow. And they'd have to install 100 roles to do one function with an Ansible playbook. And we said, yeah, that's a lot for a single person to do. Especially we can bundle it all into a collection. So now when that user wants to use Azure AWS, they pull a collection down, they're on their way, right? This more so goes into the effect of working with networking devices as well. So we'll have a collection for Cisco for iOS-XE. So if you know what devices you are, you can grab the collection for it. So as you can see here, it's our way of being able to simplify what you actually need to grab so that you can just grab less, grab what you need, and be on your way to creating Ansible playbook. What does a collection look like? Well, in the real world, this is really what a role looks like. So if you're looking down there, don't get too lost here. I know there's a lot on the screen, so I'm going to draw if that's okay. If you don't want me to draw, you can say so and I'll stop my drawing. But essentially the term here, include role, looks for a role. It has a default location, but if you're in a current folder, this is the folder it'll look for here called roles. So that means that this guy, Nginx, is a role, Nginx app protect is a role, and Nginx config is a role. All right, because all of these are separate folders in that area. So as you can see here, we're using Nginx Inc. Nginx and Nginx Inc. app protect. Oops. Oh, we'll leave that like that. Strike through right now. And then any variables that we would need for that role, we could apply as a var, or we call a var, which is a variable. These are different for each role collection that you will provide. I wish I could tell you there's some default vars, but there's not. So that means you have to go through the documentation to understand what you need as a company. So for example, if you're trying to install the Nginx Plus product, this is the variable you would need. If you would need to remove the setup license, remove the license, and install the signature or not install the signature, you could utilize these variables. And then I'm going to go over here to the left. Feel free to ask any questions at any time. I have a lot of people ask me about collections, so happy to talk until my face turns blue about collections. As you can see here, we have default, files, tasks, and templates. And then inside of all of these folders are what are called a main YAML. And that's what is actually looked for. So you can actually go through these and make changes to fit your needs if you need it. All right, I'm gonna keep going if that's okay. Automation controller. This essentially is the cloud platform, or what we call the automation controller. It includes of a few different pieces, but essentially what you can do here is manage your Ansible playbooks. The automation hub is an area where you can store your playbooks and your execution environments. We'll talk about execution environments a little bit later on. Don't worry too much. But where a lot of your Ansible is tested and vetted is actually in the command line or VS Code or in some ID. This is your first real look at an Ansible playbook run. It's very small, so I wouldn't look too much into this slide. But essentially, if you're looking at this and wanting to know more, we don't show you a lot. Hello, can you hear me? I'm sorry, I have no idea what just happened there. All right, I apologize for that. Not sure what happened. We're gonna give you desktop 1. Sorry about that. This is gonna take me a second. All right, so everybody should be able to see the display. If that's correct, just send me like a thumbs up or an exclamation point in chat. China or Russia prefer. That's funny. Sorry about that. All right, we'll keep moving on there. All right, anatomy of a workshop, automation. You don't need to know too much about that right now. Later on, you will need to know. Looks like it's a little bit out of order. Nonetheless, we'll skip through some of these and probably come back to them a little bit later. These are really the automation controller. We can talk to them right now. So inside of the Ansible automation platform, when we start getting into the UI, essentially this uses what's called the Ansible control plane. And to execute content, you need a few different core components, right? We need the Ansible playbook, which we've kind of talked about already. We need credentials, which are either stored or gathered. When I say gathered, that means you can use a third-party utility. You don't have to store everything in the Ansible platform. In fact, most companies we see that use the Ansible platform really use it for not a whole lot other than running the playbooks. They'll export the logs. They'll use LDAP for the controller. They'll use an execution environment somewhere else. So not a lot is actually stored in there. It's more of a role-based access control area and being able to make sure that appropriate individuals have the right access to the appropriate playbooks. So we'll move right on through. There are inventories and credentials. Inventory essentially is the target, or if you were paying attention in some of the previous Ansible playbooks, we call those hosts. And each of these is the device that it's going to be executed on. So whether that be an API endpoint, a physical server, that is a host. All right. Any usernames or passwords that are kept, we call a credential. Workflows are being able to stream multiple playbooks together and have them answer and go through an approval process. So you can even have companies or managers make approvals to your playbook that's about to run before you even kick it off. So for example, if you created a ticket that needed to change port 80 on this firewall, you could have a security engineer sign off on it, a security manager, right? You could have some change management in place. You could even have a few approvals together. So you could have 3 approvals, one's HR, one's IT, one's security. Or you can even do IT, security, and engineer all sign off that this is okay, this will run. And then before it runs, you can have those approvals to kick off. And they're notified via an email. And then when they come to the platform, you can even have them expire so that they don't respond in 24 hours, the playbook will consider it a fault. But this is your area where you can create some logical workflows, right? Being able to go from A to Z, as we call it. Role-based access control. This is one of the most important portions to the Ansible platform. Oftentimes, a lot of companies will start with Ansible from the command line. But as you quickly and rapidly grow, when you have a few playbooks, you need to be able to delegate roles. And being able to delegate inside of a CLI for certain playbooks is very difficult. And also you'll have a lot of engineers that do not want to SSH into a server to run an Ansible playbook, nor do I blame them. So this is your area of being able to delegate a web-based control for an Ansible playbook. Right, people only see what they need to see, can only change what they need to change. Right. And you can even have an Ansible playbook pop up and ask about surveys. So what user needs to change? Do we need to mark this closed or open? Right? Do we need to change what port on this firewall? Which firewall are we working with? All of those are important, are pieces that can be done from a role-based access control. API. This is one of the coolest features. It's an open API that can be explored, navigated however you would like. So if you prefer to work predominantly with an API, you can. Where do most companies see value in an API? Great question. That would be with utilities and chatbots. We see a lot. Watson X Assistant. I know we're an IBM company now, so I'll throw out my big blue. IBM Watson Assistant actually allows you to create workflows in a chatbot and then execute them over to an API. But this could work with a chat or like a text message, right? You could have an approval process happen through a text message and assign phone numbers out. So when this person responds yes and marks that workflow approved. Right. And we've seen SOAR integrations. A lot of SOARs will work with Ansible, Jenkins, right? CI/CD pipelines. A lot of those will work with Ansible. So lab time. So now that I have dropped off and came back, and let's get absolutely into running this lab. I'm gonna provide this in the chat. Jay, you'll probably have to take everybody off mute for this, if that's possible. Chat just can be a little bit of work when they need quick help. In the webinar chat, you can see the demo or the access to the actual equipment that you're going to be working with. You'll have to put in an email, and oops, you need this password, which I did have up, so bear with me. I'll go pull that up again. Here's the password. The email will not get spammed. Predominantly, you don't even have to put in the right email if you'd like. So as you can see here, I'm at test.com, which is definitely a domain I do not own. Not a problem. Oh. Okay, it says I'm sharing out the right screen. If I'm not sharing this out, please do let me know. Nothing's being shared on chat. That's a good thing to call out. Thank you. Hosts and panelists, we want everyone. There you go. Let me know if that works. Can you see that in chat now? Perfect. So in this email, you can type whatever you'd like. For an email, the only real portion is that you can come back to it if you ever need it. Essentially, these will go down. You have them through the rest of the evening to go and work on your own pace as much as you'd like. These are actually servers that live in AWS, but I'll access my workshop. And then let me show you what we're going to do. So first, you'll need to click this link number 1, which is going to take you to the Ansible for Windows automation. We'll show you the presenter deck here if you need it or want to follow through on your own. And if you scroll down, you can see a little bit of what's actually going on with this server. And then you're going to go to exercise 1.
What was the email?
You can use whatever email you would like. So this is a personal email. You can use whatever you'd like in there. Predominantly, it's just for logging into the device.
Thanks.
Yep. So if you want to, you can use bob@test.com, larry@test.com, curly@test.com. All of those will work. You just need to remember them for coming back. We just use them so that each person isn't working with the same AAP, the same Windows environment, right? You're not going to get successful results when running your playbooks, your workloads on somebody else. All right. So this one's telling you need to log into the automation controller. So this is going to, you're going to need multiple tabs open here, okay? And then you'll just need to follow through on exercise 1, which I'll do as well. Don't let me pull you apart or pull you aside. Perfect. I'll let you run through it on your own, but I'm going to do this quietly on mine so that if anybody wants to watch, they can. And if you have any hurdles or questions getting in here, please do let me know. This is the hardest portion of the workshop or hands-on portion, but I definitely encourage you to explore, to click around, take your time, feel free. This will be roughly about 15 minutes to run through, just letting you know. Yeah. So once I complete mine, if anybody's watching, I'll give you roughly 15 minutes. So we'll meet back at roughly 10 after, if that's easier. All right, I'm gonna put myself on mute and go through this. But feel free, like I said, to ask or chat. I have both up. No questions. All right. Hey, that's good. That means I'm answering all the questions before they're asked. That's how I like to look at it. Just as another statement, if you need to get up, walk, stretch your legs, come back. Like I said, things get reiterated quite a bit, so feel free, stretch your legs, take a breather. One thing I will call out while we're in here, I always like the Ansible control plane quite a bit. I've grown quite fond of this. But let me show you some tips and tricks while we're in here. If you ever run a job and something failed, you'll see this little rocket ship. It'll relaunch with the same attributes or anything that you may have saved. So for example, if it was at a different host or a different port, it may utilize it. But if it failed, you can relaunch just on the failed item. Another good one to show you is in the credentials. If I was to pull up, let's say this workshop credential and edit, right? Let's say I'm being sneaky and want to go get your password. Well, you don't get to see the password or the private key. The only thing you can do is replace it. That's when I get one as well. If I try to edit, it's encrypted and I can't do anything to get it out, regardless of who I am, even if I'm the owner. So the nice thing is you can replace it, but you can't pull it out. And even in the survey fields, there's a password one which hashes it right away. Yeah. So for example, if you have someone at a survey where you're trying to reset passwords, you can make them enter the password. Without that, I'll hop back into the slides. And feel free, once again, always here to answer any questions you have. And without that, does anybody need a little bit more time? You got the time, so if you'd like to take a little bit more, feel free. And I'll set the expectation that I probably won't do all of these labs unless somebody would like me to. Predominantly, I just do like the first few just to get you seated and warm, right? Make sure we're on the same path. All right, then we'll keep rolling. Ad hoc command execution. Really, this is being able to run just quick 1-2 commands on the host to be able to check that what you're running is running. This is really only valuable for Windows, and it's really only valuable inside the Ansible control plane. Right, so you want to be able to test setup or get some information back. This would be an important portion to get. Predominantly, you don't utilize this a lot with like networking or anything to handle via API because you normally know what's going to come back. Right, so it is something good to learn and cool to learn, but in real world scenarios, tend not to use this a lot. But like I said, it's quick. It's a simple way of running an ad hoc command against a host inside the Ansible control plane to just be able to verify that what you're running is going to work. You can as well run these from the CLI. You don't have to do these from the control plane. You can actually grab a module, an argument, and some variables, which look like this, to actually run an ad hoc command. Once again, can be done from the UI by simply grabbing the host, hit the run command. Oh, I thought we had that on there. Hit the run command and it'll provide you roughly around the same output. And the fun thing here is, like I said, we're going straight back into it. So this is exercise 2. I'll put myself back on mute. What is our sync up time? So 30 after, and I'll make sure all of you have enough time at that point. Okay, so put myself on mute here. If you have any questions, concerns, ask away. Welcome back. Does anybody need a little bit more time before we keep going? Anybody want a little bit more? No? All good? All good? All right. I'll keep going. If anybody needs to get a cup of coffee, use the restroom, I'd say just go for it, right? I will say, if you were paying attention here, you'll see that there's, on some of these in Windows, we can tell when a reboot or restart is required. We don't automatically do it, but inside of a playbook, you can. And inside of a playbook, we wait for the reboot to finish to continue the playbook. So that means we're pretty tolerant to reboots. But if you made a change and the machine doesn't come back at all, we can't do a whole lot there. But just simply letting you know that a playbook can be written to run through a reboot. So if you're installing some stuff, need to do a reboot, updating drivers, installing Windows GPUs, right? Need to reboot, it can handle it, no problem. It's one of those things I wish somebody had told me. I did not make the assumption that it could handle a reboot. Alrighty. Before I get moving, does anybody have any questions? I'll wait for a few seconds. Perfect. All right, we'll keep going. So what is a variable? How do we decide a variable inside of Ansible? So there's going to be two frameworks that you're going to see used a lot as variables inside of Ansible playbook. One is what we call a variable, where you're essentially inputting information. So what could be a variable is what port we're going to use, or in the past you saw arguments, right? Anything that we are providing from either a text file, or if we're providing it as an opinionated result, that is considered a variable. A fact, however, a fact is something discovered from a machine, right? Or discovered from an output of a command you ran. So those are the two different. You can set a variable in Ansible in roughly about 25 different places. Don't be too concerned with that. If you actually are setting that many variables, you can remember one trick, and that if it is an extra bars, it will overwrite everything else. That is the trick when setting 25 different layers of variables. There actually is a cheat sheet online if you need it, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. So as we said earlier, facts are information that's been derived from a machine. So if you remember, one of the exercises was to run setup. This is the output of a setup. What we do essentially is we gather information from a host. Some of the terms used are interrogate a host. You can turn it off, but by default, it is on and runs in the beginning of a playbook. And that's because all that information is pulled from it. So address, memory use, CPU type, OS version, LVM, firewall, a lot of information can be gathered. If you need a subset of information that is not in the default filter list, there's even further filters. You really don't need to look at this. This is the variable precedence. I don't know how the slide got messed up, but we'll keep moving on. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Yeah, these are some of the tasks that you just utilized for your exercise, right? But if you want to go through them, win file, right? We'll copy a file, win package, we'll install. You can actually work with third parties. So if you were looking in the modules area or the run commands to do ad hoc, we can do chocolatey. So if you don't want to do win package and you do chocolatey, you can do that instead. Chocolatey is a great tool. Win service is actually a service. As you can guess, if you're using Win here, it'll do just about what you're trying to accomplish from a Windows server, right? Template to configure and render a Gingin template. You can use Win template. The one that I see used the most for Windows tasks is Windows Shell. And that's because it's the same as running PowerShell. And a lot of Windows admins are very comfortable with PowerShell. But they're just simply providing some examples. There's a lot more than just these here. Another example of that playbook that we looked at earlier, right? And I more so want to look at the win copy feature to show you that it will copy files. So if you were actually configuring 100 IIS servers, it would copy from that control plane to those 100 servers that index HTML file. So it can be very helpful when you're trying to move and make sure files are present on a destination. All right, and you can tell that there's a state on all of these. So once again, all three of these tasks are what we call idempotent. All right. If I go down, handler task. I'll talk about it. I will say this isn't something you need to know from the get-go. There's a bunch of advanced features inside of Ansible, but not a lot of them need to be really understood or worked on unless you need or have the need. All right. But a handler task is essentially if any of these two services at the top make a change, the handler task will only run once if either of them run. So where this is helpful is if we're making a lot of changes, for example, in the IIS server, we don't want to restart it every time we run a task, right? So you can put a handlers at the very bottom of the file, and essentially it'll only run if a change is made in the IIS option, okay? And you'll see that there's notified. There should have been a notify on the second one as well, but essentially what the notify does is it notifies the handler. Once again, don't read too much into this. It's only utilized when you need it. I don't really consider it a building block. This is more of an advanced feature. Variables and facts are way more important. They are always ran sequentially. So once again, these plays are always ran from the top down. There is not a whole lot of ways to skip about. However, when you're running a playbook, and especially when applying, for example, a security profile or a VM or a template, you may see something here called tags, right? And you can actually run a playbook just utilizing tags. So on a security template for Windows, they actually have like CVE tags, and you can actually run the playbook with these tags to ensure that the appropriate profile is getting applied. So for example, DISA, STIG, PCI, HIPAA compliance, they actually have Ansible playbooks to tighten the servers down. And some of those will have tags to ensure that you're getting the right profile needed. Also, if you look at name here, ensure IIS is started, the name, that is a variable, right? You see the mustache brackets. Some like to call them curly braces, but if you call them mustache brackets, it's just fun. Right? We need more fun in our lives. So anytime you need to use a variable or a fact, it's going to go in those curly brackets. A good thing to note, right? And I'll say this slowly just so we all get it together, is if you're using a fact, right, you would put the name in there, whatever the fact was. If you're using a variable, it can use the name. Your variable should not be the name of the fact. does happen, but do your best to make it a known variable that you define. So for example, you shouldn't have one in here that says Ansible underscore IP underscore IPv4 that you set, because that is the same as the fact. There are a lot of areas to get facts. I will say that, but that's just an important countermeasure. If you ever need to see what your variable is, you can add a debug function that gives you a message of an output, and you could have the variable output. You'll use it a lot when you're working on larger playbooks to make sure that your information is coming through in a good format. Some of you may not use it. That was an assumption. But always in the names, remember we said these do not have a value, right? They're not very valuable. And that's true. They're not very valuable. But when the task is executed, these are all that is displayed. So if you make good names, as though they mean nothing to the actual playbook, they provide no functionality to the actual playbook, they do provide human understanding to what is being executed. Privilege escalation, we talked about that. There's the variable. Now, as you can see, this variable, we are providing that information as service name. And then we're applying that variable down here. So let's real quick. I like drawing. So here's the variable we are creating. See this? That means it's before the actual tasks. And this section here is the play. So this is actually being defined in the play. They can be defined later on in the playbook, but they require actually like a module to set the fact. And the module is actually called set underscore fact. Here's your Windows service, and here's where the variable is actually being utilized. And you can tell that because of the mustache brackets. So pausing here for a second to grab a swig of water and then see if anybody had any questions. This can be confusing at first. I completely get it. YAML. If this is your first time looking at YAML, it can be even more so confusing. But this is kind of like a one-on-one class, so feel free. You can ask any question you'd like. And it's really fun to ask questions on Ansible playbooks. I can answer some. I can answer a good chunk. All right, we'll keep moving. Now it's your turn. And I'll switch over to the actual workshop. We got about, what is it, 25 minutes? Oh, it should be, I think, 15. Yeah, so we'll meet back at, we'll just say 10 after the hour. It should be right. Yep. 10 after the hour will get you right on 25 minutes. And I'll run through this on my own and put myself back on mute. Yeah, I think it crashes when I switch to the slide. I'm using the tool called Slide Pilot. Sorry about that. Alrighty. Actually, you know what it probably is? I'm using a dock that uses this weird utility called Display Link. I bet you that's crashing. Well, that's right. Alrighty, so that was 3 and 4. Don't know if you guys got through both, but just wanted to check and see if you guys were able to get to both. Was everyone able to complete it? Need more time, now would be the perfect time. If not, of course, you can always work through 4, 5. I think almost finished with 4. Okay, perfect. We'll pause. We'll pause. Perfect. I'll give him more time. Yep. Yeah. Yep. There's some trickiness in this 3 and 4 exercise for sure. All right. I'll hold tight here for a few minutes. Then, if that's okay, we'll check back in like 3:20. And if anybody is already done, take a break, relax. All right, done. Perfect. Anybody else need some time? If I'm rushing you, now's the time, right? Tell me. Sometimes we can be a little bit quick in the lab times. Sometimes they're too much. I think it's just trial and error. Anybody else want some more time? Then I'll keep going. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Right. All right, we'll move on. So what are some other things? Now that I've learned the basics, what are some other things I can learn? Templating is a cool one. So if you need to apply a text file, this can be a little bit difficult with MSIs or EXEs or something like that for a template. But for example, like a web server, you could apply some variables to get the index HTML to look the way you want, or to apply a server. This template's really cool for reporting. We see people use templating for essentially filling out that setup, right? You can essentially make a file that has all those variables and use it for reporting. I've seen people use templating to create database insertions in database queries. Essentially, templates are what are called Jinja 2 formatting, right? You don't have to dig too much into it. Loops are a way of applying different variables to the same module or task. So for example, if I needed to install a package like package 1, package 2, package 3, package 4, package 5, package 6, I'd have to write 6 different modules. That's a waste of your time, right? What a loop does is it essentially adds a little condition to the bottom of that module that says loop with these items, right? So now it's just a single pass. And if you want any tips for creating Ansible playbook, the smaller you can make it, the easier it is to read, the easier it is to change, right? Conditionals, being able to make some checks and verifications, essentially a when statement or a where statement, right? Tags, we talked about that. A block. Now, a block has the ability to have a conditional on it as well as a rescue block. So a block could be a piece of code for when Windows, run this. When Linux, run this. Right? Feel free. You can ask as many questions as you'd like on those as well. Right, so Jinja 2 is a templating engine, and it was not created by Ansible, or not created by the Ansible team, but we utilize it to include variables. And you can even get some conditionally logic in there. So you can make some crazy things happen with Jinja 2. For example, you can use if statements inside of a Jinja 2 template. You can make a JQ query. You can do whatever you essentially would like from an HTML format in Jinja 2. And then you can apply the variables inside of a Jinja 2. So for reporting, it can be really reporting rich. And a lot of times when I see companies take that opportunistic approach, reporting is something that can get better from a company. And Jinja 2 is a good one that I see taken on, where people will create like a web page where all of these SQL or Jinja 2 templates that have gotten data from the host will actually be out there. And I think there's even some open source Git projects for those. So seen a lot happen with this portion of Ansible. All right. There's your first look at a loop. Let me grab a pencil. And here's the loop statement. And all it is doing is running this module twice with a name change. So the first loop will run this guy. And then the second loop will run this guy. Or girl, whatever you'd like to call them, this item. Clear them out. And keep going. The when statement, right? Conditionals. So let's look at this conditional. I use these quite a bit. So the end of the module really is here. Here is the conditional. So this is an Ansible fact. We've got to use double equal sign. Is Windows. It could be Linux. You can even go into a version of Windows. So when Windows 11, Windows 10, right? Or greater than. A lot of flexibility here on whatever you'd like to do. You can even have multiple statements. So you could have an and statement. Oof. You can even have an or statement to have more when or more, right? Here's your tags. Remember we said you can run a playbook with tags. You probably have already seen that, but these are the tags at the bottom here. This one's actually running a Jinja 2 template too. And this one's running a loop. All right. Blocks. Blocks essentially bundle groups of tasks together. A lot of that is done for error handling, but it can be also done when we're creating a playbook to be created as a role. So you could have a block to handle Azure deployments or a block to handle Windows deployments. And the other cool thing you can do about a block is you can use what's called a rescue block. And that when this block fails, there's a rescue block to back out all the work that didn't complete or all the work that got to there so far. Right? And then guess what? It's time for a lab. Unless anybody has a question, which I'll pause before we get rolling into the lab. Because this is when I kind of let you out and do the work on your own. Unless you have any help or need any help. Any questions? Okay, perfect. Well, I'll let you guys hop to it. We'll meet roughly about 5 after. I'm going to check out on it on everybody about 5 after, okay? Anybody need some more time? If not, we'll keep moving. All righty. Only a few slides left. You're almost there. All right. We talked about roles. It is the way that you're always going to pull data down from the galaxy or collection. So I really wouldn't. I think that's the best way to highlight it. This is going to be your layout. It's always going to be in a bunch of different folders. That's completely normal. The better thing to know is it goes into a roles folder. If you are creating roles, you can create it with Ansible Galaxy roles, and it will create a role for you. Yeah, this is how we execute a role. All you simply have to do after the task portion, or actually you gotta use a roles portion, and it'll execute. So it's very simple. If you have any extra bars, they can be at the top. They can be in the bottom of the bars section as well. Galaxy.ansible.com. Now this, let's go do this together. Definitely recommend you go here if you can, if you've never been before. So essentially, if you need a jump start, right? And you need to be able to, you have an idea of what you want, but you don't know where to start, this is a great place to go. So if, for example, I want to install something with Docker, I can find some Docker stuff. Very cool. If I want to look at Cisco, there's going to be some Cisco modules in here. And then if you go look at the modules, you can get a further idea of how to install it, how to configure it. More so importantly, you can actually even get documentation out of this. You can go to issue tracker and take a look and see how everything's going with everybody else, which is going to be in GitHub. Right. This is where a lot of them will take you is GitHub. We kind of make a requirement. Some vendors don't use GitHub. Some, but predominantly not. So this is Galaxy. This is where you can go to find collections or roles, right? You can always see what's trending right now, what's been changed. This is the greatest place to go because everything in here is roughly free. So I'd tell you to come in here, take a look, see what you can deploy, see what you can configure, see if something meets your needs. I'm preparing this while we were on that break, but it's okay. We'll do it right now. With the Ansible automation purchase, you get what is called Insights, which is what you're looking at here. Insights gives you a view into what you're currently running. So these are actually my playbooks that have ran. If we're having any problems, you really don't need to worry about learning resources. We can definitely provide you that. So don't get too lost into the learning resources here. There's tons of free learning resources for Ansible. But the Automation Hub can include the collections, or we call them certified collections. You can tell because they're certified here. And all of these are included with the Ansible purchase. Once again, they provide both support between Ansible and the vendor. We don't really need to do any of that, but we can look at this reporting, which is what I like the most. Essentially here, I have some jobs that we've been running, I don't know, for the last few months. And essentially these are playbooks that are running on my Ansible based on this formula, which you can go and grab yourself, or this job can do it for you. You can take a look into what you're running, how you're saving, and you can even get a full report, which will export it, right? And then you can go to Savings Planner. And the way that Savings Planner works is it actually grabs a playbook that you're running, and then you can give it some information. And then it'll give you statistics of what you're going to save yearly in money, right? Or time. Right, both of these are pretty important, but I like the time one the most because it'll show you based on the information I provided it, how much time we're going to save. You know, initially we'll be in the whole 168 hours to deploy this network automation bootstrap, but year one, we're going to save 228 hours after we make it. And then year two, even with some additional tuning of the playbooks, right, we're still going to be saving 262 hours. So it's pretty fun. You can play around with some numbers in there. The automation calculator is one I like because you can, of course, grab your time and then you can show it based on what somebody makes, right? Well, no, I don't make $405 an hour, but yeah. You can play around with it and get some dynamic information. Right. So you can tune this to your needs based upon what you have and are running inside of your Ansible automation platform to get a good report, to be able to share with your team, your boss, to see how much you're essentially saving, how much value you're providing. You can even go to a job explorer and take a look at how some of these previous jobs ran, even the time it took, or you can look for failures. And then you even have Ansible Lightspeed, which I don't have on here to show you today, but essentially uses Watson Code Assistant to help autocomplete some of your playbooks. Right. And we do have a lab on Ansible Code Assistant if you're interested as well. We even have a self-paced one if you're interested. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions on those, feel free to ask away. All right. And this is on to lab 6. So it's your turn again. You got roughly 15 minutes. So we'll meet up 10 past the hour. The exercises do we have left? I think that's the last one. Yep. All right. So I'll talk to you again and probably at 10 after. I'm still here. Yeah, so let me quickly tack on a few things while we're here. We're now pretty much done, but I wanted to tell you these labs are up for quite a bit longer, at least till the end of the day. And there's some other options here. I know that a lot of people want to know about patching Windows, and that actually is your next exercise. So I definitely would recommend, if that is something that you're trying to do, to go ahead and run through this. I think this guy roughly takes about 20 minutes, but can give you an idea of kind of what you're looking for, especially with updates for Windows. This is a really good spot to kind of dive deep into. It is an optional, of course, all these are optional. You don't have to go through them if you don't want to, but just simply wanted to call it out that there are some additional ones if you'd like to run through them. Without that, there are some great places to go for some more information. We even have free training online. If you're in that webpage where your exercises were, there's more workshops in there. You can ask us absolutely at any time to run them. If you want to go through this workshop with some of your other colleagues and partners, you're more than welcome to. We can do a private workshop, or we can even just provide you the tools and you can do it on your own. Right? You have the slide deck, you have the exercises. The only thing you don't have is the lab. And I'm happy to provide that. Just simply reach back out or reach to Angela and she can get you the information you need. So, and say, how would we reach out? Right here, all the information you need to reach out to Angela. And you can either run some more workshops, or hopefully I'll be hearing or seeing from you soon. But apart from that, I want to thank you very much for your time today. We're we're now at the end of the workshop. And really, this is kind of an area where I leave you with some Q&A if you'd like to ask questions. But absolutely, if not, you're more than welcome to drop. And thank you very much for your time. I know this is a big commitment. You do have a little bit of more time available if you'd like to run through any of the exercises or go back through them. But apart from that, thank you. And thank you very much, Abrams Consulting. Yep. Thank you, everyone.